Chapter 1. The Announcement. Evelyn Hart woke up at 6 in the morning, before the alarm went off, with the feeling that someone had spoken her name from some dark corner of the room. There was no one there. The apartment remained silent, suspended in that uncertain hour when the city had not fully awakened yet. For a few seconds she remained motionless, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember whether she had dreamed something, but she could not recall images or voices, only a strange pressure in the air, as if something immense had moved across the world while everyone slept. Then she saw the phone glowing on the nightstand. The screen was flooded with notifications, news alerts, messages, missed calls, and live broadcasts. At first, Evelyn thought of a war, an attack, some distant disaster, but the first sentence she read left her frozen. The United States officially confirms the existence of real UAP phenomena. She slowly sat up, still wrapped in the sheets, and opened a live broadcast. On the screen appeared an official hall, flags, journalists, stern-faced military officers, and a spokesman in a dark suit reading a statement with a calm that felt too rehearsed. He said that for decades, aerial objects had been recorded performing maneuvers impossible for known technology, that some files could no longer remain classified, and that humanity had to prepare itself to accept a new reality. The channels repeated the news with headlines that grew larger by the minute. UFOs were real, UAPs were real. The government had confirmed it. Within minutes, the entire planet began looking upward. Videos appeared from California, Japan, Chile, Norway, Spain, and Argentina. Motionless lights above cities, glowing spheres over the ocean, black triangles cutting through clouds, objects that stopped abruptly and vanished as if someone had switched off an image. But Evelyn noticed something almost no one else mentioned. In some videos, the strange thing was not the craft. It was the sky around it. In one recording, the stars seemed to duplicate for a fraction of a second. In another, the clouds flickered in small blocks, as if the image of the sky were damaged. In a third, the horizon shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if two layers of reality were not aligned. Evelyn found other videos from before the announcement and discovered even stranger things in the skies, as if they were filled with errors. Sudden shadows in the heavens, birds and even airplanes frozen in time, stars that flickered or disappeared. Then she returned to the announcement and replayed those videos over and over again. She was not looking for craft. She was looking for errors. And then she remembered a sentence written years earlier in one of the manuscripts attributed to Helen Morris. When the sky begins to fail, do not look upward. Look toward the edges. A slow chill moved through her chest. Over the last few months, the name Helen Morris, from Claudio Nocelli's stories, had begun circulating again in forums, documentaries, small channels, and recovered archives. Not as a legend, but as an uncomfortable piece of a much older history. Helen spoke of lands behind the ice walls, sealed passages, separated humanities, ancients who had lived before the enclosure, and an Anunnaki custodial colonization that had not come from the stars, but from hidden territories beyond the permitted world. At first, almost no one had taken it seriously. Then too many people began connecting the same points. Restricted Antarctic routes, incomplete maps, regulated expeditions, space missions impossible to verify through direct experience, accounts of the ancients, references to Helen Morris, documents about the custodians, and the possibility that humanity was not trapped on a lost planet in space, but inside an administered region surrounded by limits that were never meant to be reached. Another curious detail was that several highly recognized film directors had been used, and by coincidence, they had released films about UFO-related disclosure, objects emerging from the water, unknown underwater bases, and several other themes appearing all at once. Evelyn began to realize that something seemed to be hidden behind all of this. Not because it was completely false, but why now, she wondered. Something else seemed to be guiding the sudden disclosure of the entire subject. The phone vibrated again. It was a message from her uncle, Nathan Reed. Nathan had worked for years in a restricted area connected to his country's Air Force and had certain contacts. Everyone in the family knew he had seen things, but no one knew exactly what. He never spoke about his work, except for one day when he tried to say something but stopped halfway, and no one wanted to pressure him. Whenever someone mentioned military bases, strange objects, or Antarctica, he would simply lower his eyes and change the subject. Her uncle's message said, "Do not believe the way they are telling it." Evelyn froze. She replied immediately, "What does that mean?" The 3 dots appeared on the screen, disappeared, and appeared again. Finally, another message arrived. The objects are real, but they have nothing to do with the story they are telling. Before she could type another question, Nathan sent a 13-second video. The image appeared to have been taken from a military aircraft over an endless white expanse. At first, Evelyn thought it was Antarctica. Then she saw something that did not fit. An immense vertical shadow rising from the ice toward the sky like an impossible wall. The camera shook, there was interference, and a military code blinked in one corner. Then it happened. The sky above that wall flickered. For an instant, the blue vanished. Behind it, there were no stars, no space, no void. There was a white surface, illuminated from within, as if the sky were a layer placed over something else. The video cut off. Evelyn stopped breathing for a second. She looked out the window. Outside, the dawn was beginning to tint the buildings orange. Everything looked normal. The cars, the lights, the antennas, the windows, the still clouds above the city. But the sky no longer seemed infinite to her. It seemed like a cover. Nathan's final message arrived a few seconds later. This did not begin with the UAP. It began because too many people were looking at the ice walls. Too many people were reading about Helen Morris. Too many people were asking about the ancients and the Anunnaki custodial colonization. They are going to make everyone look toward outer space. Do not look at the craft, Evelyn. Look at what they are trying to hide behind them. Chapter 2: The File. Evelyn did not answer the final message. She remained sitting on the bed, holding the phone in her hand, staring at the now dark screen as if something else might still appear. Outside, the city was beginning to move with an almost insulting normality. Engines, shutters, voices in the street, buses advancing beneath a clean sky. Everything remained the same, but for her, nothing was the same anymore. She replayed the video Nathan had sent. The white expanse, the impossible wall, the sky flickering above the ice. 13 seconds were enough to break an entire lifetime of certainties. She called her uncle 3 times. On the third, Nathan answered, but he did not speak immediately. Evelyn heard only heavy breathing and a distant sound, like wind striking metal. "Do not call me again on an open line," he said. His voice did not sound shaken. It sounded controlled, and that frightened her even more. Evelyn lowered her voice. "What did you send me?" "Proof that the announcement is not a revelation," Nathan replied. "It is a diversion. They are going to say that everything comes from outside, from other worlds, from distant spheres. That will be the permitted story. But it is not what they fear the most. What they fear is that people stop looking at the sky and start looking toward the ice walls, toward the edges of this world." Evelyn walked to the window and closed the curtains. She did not know why she was doing it, but suddenly her apartment felt too exposed. On the television, without sound, the anchors repeated images of lights over cities and dark objects passing through clouds. A red banner at the bottom read, "Humanity faces contact." Nathan continued speaking. He explained that for years, reserved programs had managed to contain doubt through ridicule, censorship, and entertainment. Anyone who mentioned lands beyond Antarctica was turned into a joke. Any reference to Helen Morris was pushed into myth. Any question about the ancients, the sealed passages, or the Anunnaki custodial colonization was mixed with noise, fantasy, and confusion. But something had changed. In recent months, too many people had begun connecting the same points. Independent researchers compared ancient maps with modern routes. Retired pilots spoke of zones where instruments failed. Small creators translated fragments of manuscripts attributed to Helen Morris. Others recovered accounts of separated humanities behind the ice, territories administered by custodians, and traces of a colonization that did not descend from the stars, but advanced from hidden regions outside the permitted world. It was not one single theory, it was a shared direction. And that direction did not point upward, it pointed toward the edges. "So they used the UAP," Evelyn said. Nathan took a few seconds to answer. "They did not use them, they released them. The objects exist, Evelyn. Some craft are human, others are not, others are inherited technology, others were born from reverse engineering. But the public will not receive that story. It will receive a version designed to keep everyone looking toward outer space. If they see lights, they will say visitors from distant spheres. Everything will be placed inside a new explanation, but a controlled one." Nathan then sent her a file. It had no title, only a combination of letters and numbers. Evelyn opened it from her computer, disconnecting the Wi-Fi first, her hands cold and her heart pounding against her chest. The first page was a grey scan, filled with stamps, erased signatures, and censored lines. At the top it read, "Narrative Containment Protocol, UAP event, public redirection phase." She moved forward slowly. There were maps of Antarctic zones marked in red, interrupted maritime routes, aerial photographs of white surfaces, reports on celestial anomalies, captures of interrupted broadcasts, and lists of terms that had to be repeated in the media. Contact, external origin, visitors, non-human technology, unknown threat. But there were also forbidden words. Evelyn read them one by one: ice walls, Helen Morris, ancients, outer passages, custodial colonization, territorial origin, unregistered lands. She felt the air disappear from the room. On a later page, she found an order underlined several times. Do not redirect attention toward the ice walls. Every aerial phenomenon must be associated with external origin, not territorial origin. Evelyn remained motionless in front of the screen. The sentence was not trying to deny the UAP. It was trying to define the direction from which humanity had to think. She kept reading until she found a section titled Morris Materials. It mentioned fragments of testimonies, letters, and files connected to Helen Morris. Some were almost completely blacked out, but certain phrases remained visible. Previous humanities, administration of the sky, sealed passages, intervened memory, first colonies behind the ice. Below, another note said, do not allow Helen Morris to be associated with the UAP events. Her testimony leads to the ancients lead to the walls lead to the origin of the colonization. Evelyn placed one hand on the table. For the first time, she understood the magnitude of the operation. They were not revealing that craft existed. They were delivering a lesser truth in order to protect a greater one. The public could accept objects in the sky, external intelligences, even recovered technology. What it could not accept was that human history had been enclosed inside an administered region, that the sky had served as a distraction for generations, and that the real outside was not in the stars, but behind the ice. On the final page of the file, there was an old blurry image, like a copy of a copy. It showed a white line stretching toward the horizon, and beyond it, shadows of impossible territories, mountains, rivers, structures, and a zone marked with a red circle. Beneath the image, a typed sentence read, "The public can accept craft. It cannot accept lands behind the ice." Evelyn stared at those words until the screen seemed to breathe in front of her. The phone vibrated again. It was Nathan. "Now you understand why they moved the announcement forward." Evelyn did not answer. Another message appeared immediately after. The disclosure did not begin because they wanted to talk about the UAP. It began because the story of Helen Morris started circulating too quickly. And then the last one. You must leave your apartment. Now. Chapter 3. The Redirection. Evelyn did not think. She closed the computer, grabbed her phone, and left the apartment wearing only what she had on, avoiding the elevator, going down the stairs as if every camera in the building already knew she had opened the file. In the street, the city continued functioning with a strange normality. People walked while looking at their phones, cars moved forward, coffee shops began to fill, and on every screen the same story repeated itself. The UAP were real, the craft existed, the government had confirmed it, and humanity had to prepare for contact. But Evelyn no longer heard those words as a revelation. She heard them as an order. She walked several blocks without a clear direction until she entered a small coffee shop where no one seemed to pay attention to her. She sat in the back, opened the computer without connecting to any network, and returned to the file. She needed to understand before deciding whether she should run, speak, or remain silent forever. The final pages no longer looked like technical reports, but instructions for a narrative operation. There were dates, distribution channels, recommended words, and forbidden words. The recommended words were simple: visitors, external origin, contact, non-human threat, technology from other worlds. The forbidden ones were more dangerous: ice walls, Helen Morris, ancients, outer territories, Anunnaki custodial colonization, origin behind the ice. Evelyn felt a slow nausea. They were not improvising. They had not come forward because the truth could no longer be hidden. They had come forward because they needed to trap it inside an acceptable form. If humanity saw lights in the sky, it had to think of outer space. If a camera captured a failure above the horizon, it had to think of UAP activity. If someone mentioned Antarctica, the passages, or the lands behind the walls, it had to be absorbed into the new general explanation. Everything came from above, from far away, from other worlds. Nothing had to lead toward the edges. On one of the pages, she found a sentence underlined in red. The population can accept an invasion from the stars. It cannot accept that its history was administered from territories that still exist behind the ice. Evelyn read that line several times, feeling the entire announcement of the morning rearrange itself inside her head. The craft were not the lie. The lie was the direction from which they had to be interpreted. The system did not fear people believing in advanced technology. It feared people would stop looking at the sky and begin asking who had sealed the paths of the earth. Then she received another message from Nathan. Not everyone inside the program knows the same thing. Some believe this is planetary defense. Others believe they are preparing humanity for external visitors, which may also be a probable option. But very few know the real reason. Evelyn replied with a single question. What is the real reason? The answer took almost a minute. Helen Morris reconnected too many things. Her texts point to the ancients. The ancients point to the first humanities. The first humanities point to the lands behind the walls. And the walls point to the origin of the Anunnaki custodial colonization. And all of it leads to human spiritual power, to infinite spiritual potential, and to human freedom after all. Evelyn looked up. On one of the coffee shop screens, another official broadcast appeared. The same spokesman from the morning was speaking from Washington, this time surrounded by military officers. He said there was no immediate threat, that several nations would work together, and that humanity had to remain united in the face of the phenomenon. Evelyn lowered her eyes to the file and found the same speech, written weeks earlier, with notes in the margins. One of them said, "Reinforce the idea of external origin. Avoid any association with restricted geography." The world was not receiving a truth. It was receiving a script. Suddenly, all the screens in the place failed at the same time. First came a white line, then blue interference, and then the transmission cut out for barely 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, it did not show the spokesman, or the flags, or the craft. It showed an ancient image, as if taken from a great height. a white expanse, an endless wall, and behind it shadows of mountains, rivers, and impossible structures beneath a light that did not seem to belong to the known sky. No one spoke. The entire coffee shop hung in silence. Then the transmission returned as if nothing had happened. But it was already too late. Some people had seen the image. A man stood up. A woman dropped a cup. Another customer raised his phone and began recording the screen, even though the signal had already returned to the official speech. Evelyn looked toward the window. Outside in the street, people were starting to stop. At first, she thought they were looking at another craft, another light, another object in the sky. But it was not that. They were all looking south, toward an invisible horizon beyond buildings, roads, oceans, and maps. The phone vibrated again. "It no longer matters whether you publish the file or not," Nathan wrote. "Something inside the system is failing." The redirection began too late. Evelyn opened the final page. There was an incomplete map, barely visible beneath stains, censorship marks, and old annotations. At the lower edge appeared the name Helen Morris, not as an author, as a documentary threat. Beneath it, a note said, "Do not release." This material shifts public interest from the UAP to the Outer Lands. Evelyn understood then that she did not need to publish everything. She did not need to explain every document, every route, every name, every connection. She only needed to break the direction of the story. She selected a single image, the page where it read, "The public can accept craft. It cannot accept lands behind the ice." She uploaded it without a title, without a signature, without a comment. For a few seconds nothing happened. Then the first reposts came. Hundreds, thousands, millions. The sentence began to circulate alongside screenshots of the map, fragments about Helen Morris, references to the ancestrals, and old texts about the Anunnaki custodian colonization. Some said it was false. Others said it was an operation inside another operation. Others simply stopped talking about craft and began searching for the walls. Evelyn left the coffee shop when the sun was already high. The city was still covered in screens insisting on contact, visitors, external origin, and the new era of humanity. But in the streets, something had changed. People were still looking upward, yes, but not everyone was looking at the lights anymore. Some watched the sky as if it were a lid. Others opened maps. Others searched for routes to the south. Then Evelyn understood that the true disclosure had not begun when governments admitted the UAP. It had begun when the first person began to question what existed behind the ice.